Hi, everyone, and welcome to Tracking Student Growth with SmartMusic. Before we get started, I have just a couple of housekeeping notes for you. We encourage you to download the Whova app, where you can access all of our event content easily from your phone. Check out the links in the chat to find out more about how to download it. We would like to note that all sessions on the on-demand session track will be viewable any time of the day today, so feel free to choose your own adventure. All live sessions today will be recorded and will be available on Whova within the next week. They will be available exclusively to you until the end of July. We have provided a downloadable certificate of attendance linked in the description for each live session today. We have also included a link to this session's certificate in the chat. I'm going to paste that in there right now. If you have a question that we are unable to answer during this session time, we encourage you to join a community board where your questions will be answered. I would now like to introduce our presenter for today, Kevin Mead. Kevin has recently retired after 35 years as a public school music teacher. He has performed as a percussionist with community orchestras, bands, and musical pits, as well as has been invited to conduct several area all-county bands. He has been a certified big music clinician trainer for over 17 years. Mr. Mead was twice named Teacher of the Year by the National Honor Society, received the Willie W. Lightfoot Youth Advocate of the Year Award from the Monroe County Legislature, and the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra's prestigious Music Educator of the Year for Band in 2017. Thank you for being with us today, Kevin.
Thank you very much, Giovanna. I appreciate that. I just want to cover the subject matter today and how we got here before we get too in depth with the information. Tracking student growth came out of a process that the state of New York came out with several years ago before I retired, called the Annual Professional Performance Review, the APPR. And what that was it was a way for New York State to keep track of the teachers and their performance and how to review them. The nice thing was they left it kind of open in how that was to happen. But in short, it was the state and the district wanted to track student growth and show that your students improved from the beginning of the year to the end. Now, with it being open, teachers were coming up with a wide variety of solutions to the problem. From recording your first rehearsal to recording your concert and showing growth, which is absolutely correct, and they show the growth. But my colleague and I worked very closely together. We taught in the same school. Wanted to make this a little more. We wanted to take advantage of the opportunity and show our district that we could come up with an authentic process to actually track student growth using data, and we had lots of conversations about it, and this presentation is basically what that was. So the first thing we looked at was the national standards for music education. Do we want to just assess performing, responding, creating, connecting? Do we want to we had to address that issue because that was something that was important to us, as all of these are important to us. All right. And then we had to have a conversation about what are some ways to track student growth. And the one way was knowledge-based, where the kids would sit down and take a test. And the other way was performance-based. And teachers picked different ones. Knowledge-based is where, in the gym class, the gym teacher would say, all right, now we're going to take a test on about basketball and about this and about this. Performance-based test would have been something like, we're going to show the difference between your basketball skills at the beginning and at the end. So in music, we really felt it important to come up with a performance-based assessment of some sort. And the other thing was, is it informal or is it formal? As music educators, we are constantly informally assessing our kids. Every single time they play, we are telling them how to correct it. We are informally assessing them. But we as teachers wanted to come up with a way to make it a little more formal so that the information lasts longer, is more reliable, can be duplicated, and all of those things. So we're looking at possibly coming up with a formal performance-based assessment. So here's some of the things that we had to discuss with our administration in order to get them to approve this process. Is this acceptable for you? First of all, our process is going to measure individual student growth. All right, that's the number one thing that they're after. We are also going to be able to use this process to improve instruction throughout the school year. The very first test that we give is going to be a formative test, and we're going to keep track of that information. And then at the end of the year, possibly give a summative test and see where the growth was, using the information to improve instruction. All right, we are going to be able to differentiate the instruction for each individual kid because we're going to have individual data collected on each one of our kids. All right. We're also going to be able to assess the program as a whole, K through 12, using this process, because if everybody in the district participates in this, we're going to know where our strengths are and where our weaknesses are and be able to improve on that. And hopefully, finally, this will meet the district and the state requirements for APPR, which our district did approve and let us move forward. So once they did that, we had some considerations to look into. First of all, it needed to be reliable. It can't be an authentic, effective performance assessment if it's not reliable. Is it duplicatable? All right. So can we rely on the results? Because the number of variables are huge, whether it's live, recorded, student plays alone, all of those things have to be taken into account. What is it that we want to assess? That was a long discussion about what kind of things do we want to assess that are going to give us information and things that we want our students to improve on. One example versus several examples. Do we want just, one little test question, or do we want several test questions? A lot of variables involved there, but we had to pick and discuss which one's best to get the best results. What is actually being assessed is what I'm going to talk a lot about in this session, because sometimes we think one thing is being assessed and it's not being, that one thing is what's not being assessed. So we really had to look in that and do a lot of testing with kids and find out, am I actually assessing what I think I'm assessing? So we'll talk about that. And of course, the pre versus the post test. Specific considerations, now that we've narrowed it down a little bit. The technology we decided to use SmartMusic, but we wanted to make sure that kids have a working knowledge of that technology, because let's face it, we don't want the technology itself to be the determining factor on whether the student is successful with the project. Does the technology mess with the results? We certainly don't want that. So we've got to make sure the students are capable of using the technology, whatever it is. If it's a recording, if it's Zoom, if it impacts the student's assessment, it's going to impact the results of this. The testing process itself, we've got to literally lay out step by step. How can we eliminate as many variables as possible? What type of examples to pick? Obviously, unlimited number of examples, but which ones are going to get us the best results, the most dependable results, the most reliable results. And one of the questions that came up was, have an accompaniment in the background while they're doing their performance. Perhaps the accompaniment is helping them to reproduce what we want, or is it hurting them? If a student, the accompaniment messes them up, they're hearing a different rhythmic pattern and they're supposed to do something. Is the accompaniment messing them up? Should we try just the metronome? So we had to really talk about that in a lot of ways. In terms of SmartMusic, the assessment itself is an objective assessment. SmartMusic will tell you if you played the right note at the right time. And the recording, the teacher graded part, is something that's a little more subjective. And this is something that our district really, really grabbed its eyes on, because now we have both. We don't just have a teacher grading the entire student. Say, for instance, the student performance at the beginning of the year, teacher says, oh, that's horrible, that's a 0. And then the student does the same exact performance at the end, and the teacher says, that's 100. Look at how great I am as a teacher. We now have both subjective and objective grading to demonstrate in our data. What system of measurement to use, whether it's a 0 to 100 scale, or if it's a rubric, or if it's an ABCD, we had to discuss what we were going to use to, once again, keep it reliable. So what to test? The units that we were looking at, obviously not all of these. I just wrote down some that everybody could look at. As a band director, I didn't have to cover some of these, but I'm sensitive to the fact that there's plenty of people out there. And what we decided to do is not necessarily the right answer. Matter of fact, guarantee you it's not the right answer for everybody. So maybe taking some of this information and creating it for you is the best direction to go here. So what is it you value? Is it sight reading? Is it rhythm? Is it scales? Is it articulation, rudiments, bowing, posture? What are the things that you want to assess? All right. And then let's go back to those, the other parts of the responding, the creation. Are we going to include those in our test, or are we going to not include those? We wanted to include those. We wanted some sort of responding part. In other words, does the student have the knowledge about the music that he's playing? Can he assess? Can he evaluate? Can he or she do those things? In terms of creation, does the student have the ability to compose? And can we use that in our ensemble to improve? All right, any combination of those things. So here's some of the decisions we made. Once again, you can make your own decisions, move forward with that. We decided to use SmartMusic because of the amount of material in SmartMusic and the way SmartMusic helps us both objectively assess and to collect and store the data that we receive. The next thing we looked at was the examples that were within SmartMusic for each musical unit we chose. We selected a different example for every unit, right? That's just the way we chose to do it. Of course, that's for the performing. Use the sight reading setting, but this is really important. We decided to use the sight reading setting because that way we can control the amount of time the student has to prepare for that test question. If we sent this assessment home and Susie spent 8 hours on the assessment and performed it at a certain level, would that give us information that would be comparable to Johnny, who went home and opened it and without even looking at it, hit play and recorded something? Johnny might have been the same exact score as Susie, but there's two different results there. So we wanted to control that setting. In other words, we don't want to just assess sight reading skill. We want to assess some of these other units. So what we decided to do was to set the sight reading for 2 minutes and tell the kids practice out loud for 2 minutes. That way, everybody has 2 minutes to practice it before they play. So we have now comparing apples to apples in terms of two different kids. The test starts automatically after 2 minutes, and then it gets sent to the teacher. The SmartMusic assessment and the teacher generator rubrics are what we are going to use to assess, so we have both objective and subjective. We use the same examples and testing technique for all the students, both pre and post test. Everything is apples to apples so that we can compare the results. And we decided to include an essay on evaluating a performance and a composition question. I do want to mention that if you have a deeper interest in that part of this, the essay, the responding and the creating, I'm doing a session tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern time on the standards, and I will be focusing on those two. So if you want to try to catch that one, that's great. But here's basically the written essay. We played a performance of something that was done years ago. We had the kids evaluate what they thought of the performance specifically, and then we used this particular rubric to grade them. We wanted to make sure that it was a paragraph with English being as correct as possible, so we included English skills and organization, but we wanted depth of the critique. How, that piece was really good, or that piece was just terrible, there's not a lot of depth to that. Tell us why. Use vocabulary, music terminology to the articulation made it unclear, all right? And the examples, these are the kind of things that could improve the intonation of the piece, all right? Those kind of things is what we were looking for. Out of 20 points, that was the written essay. And the composition was basically a 7-point additive scale. I gave 7 requirements for the kids to write their composition, the correct clef, the key signature, start and end on do, tonic and dominant patterns that are indicated, indicate the time signature to write your correct number of eighth notes or whatever. Don't use 16th notes. We don't want anything too busy here. Use proper and neatly write your proper notation and write a good melody, each one worth 1 point. So as I mentioned, if that's something you're interested in, not just how we took the test, but how we use that information to improve, tomorrow's session is going to talk about that a lot.
Kevin, a quick question came in
Sure,
through
go
the
ahead.
chat related to the performance. Stefan Labelle asked, did you use individual microphones with SmartMusic or did you use the student laptop mics?
It's a very difficult question for me to answer because being retired for 4 years now, when we gave this exam, we gave it using Classic. So we were using microphones that were set up, the microphones that we purchased from SmartMusic. So we haven't given this here. If I were to give a suggestion, I would use a laptop and use the internal microphone, unless you think otherwise. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you for your answer, Kevin. Stefan, hopefully
thank you for the question.
Yes.
Advantages of our process, finding out to what degree your students understand music overall, not just whether the student can play the right note at the right time and push the right button or move the bow in the right direction, but do they understand music? That's the advantage. Early identification of students struggling with the tool, and this could go to that question. If their students are having a hard time with the tool, we want to address that early in the school year so they can find success. So we're going to address that issue with the students in their lessons. And that was a great advantage because that way we eliminated that, oh, I didn't know you were having a hard time with SmartMusic, let's figure it out. So early identification of that. Plenty of data available, the screenshot, the grade, the rubric score, the recording, all of that available to us at any time because it's there forever. So we can compare 9th grade student to their 12th grade results and see how they've grown over 4 years. The objective and the subjective grading, I think, was absolutely huge. And when possible, students can be grouped by ability for small group instruction. This took it to the next level. We take those pre-results and we say, all right, these students are having a hard time with pulse. So let's put them in a pulse group. These students are having a hard time with range. Let's put them in range. These students are having a hard time with this. And we could group our students when possible in order to meet their needs so that we could help them a little more than perhaps the other students that are not struggling in that area. And then sharing the information with the other teachers in the district. Instead of receiving the information from the 8th grade teacher that Susie's a nice girl, she'll practice whenever you want. Johnny, he's not going to practice no matter what you say. I could get information as specific as this so I know where the student is so I can help them hit the ground running, as they say. All right. So let's talk about some specific examples. When using one piece, if you decide to just use one piece, try to cover as many units as possible in that piece. So let's say I select this piece, I could cover key recognition, I could cover rhythm, I could cover articulation, I could cover dynamics. Those are the 4 things I'm going to cover with this one piece because they're all in there. Now, I'm going to make a suggestion. If you do decide to do it this way, which our course teacher did, we want one example, and I'm going to do all these things. The first few times you listen to it, you want to listen to each one individually. So you're going to listen to it 4 times. The first time you're going to listen, you're going to see if the rhythm is correct. The second time you're listening, you're only going to listen to the articulation. Then you're going to listen to the key signature and see if they caught that F sharp in the 3rd measure. Then you're going to listen to, and that way, the one thing that say the student is messing up with rhythm, is he also messing up with articulation, or is the messed up rhythm messing with his articulation? That kind of makes sense. So that's a good way to do it. Real short, real brief, but I suggest listen to them separately. And the better you get at it, the better you'll do it, obviously. But if you do choose, like we did, to do several examples, what you need to do is to make sure that what is not being assessed doesn't have a negative impact on what is being assessed. Let me explain that with the rhythm example here. I just want to assess your ability to play in duple meter, your ability to play with 16th notes. This is a good example of a way to do that. If I was to put something that had articulation in there, the articulation could impact negatively the results of the test for this rhythm. If I was to put something with a lot of pitches in or in a hard key, just thinking, oh, that was D flat, the rhythm's gone at that point, so I'm not assessing the rhythm. So I'm selecting pieces that are not going to have a negative impact on what is being assessed. What not being assessed is not going to impact what is being assessed. Here's another example. I want to assess tone. So I want to select something that's very easy to play so the student can focus on tone. The student doesn't have to worry about range, doesn't have to worry about rhythm, doesn't have to focus on concentration. I'm just going to play with my best tone possible. That way I can assess as a teacher the student's ability to play with a good tone. Make sense? Okay. Another option, keep it open. If you can't find an example in SmartMusic, you always have a compose feature or in Finale to write your own examples. I'm just going to remind you, if you are in an ensemble, like a choir, like a orchestra, that you're going to write it for the entire ensemble, for the score. That way each student can open up their own part and not have to play a baritone part if they're a flute player or something like that. So make sure you write it for the whole score. That way the students can open up their own part. All right, setting up the assessment. Create the class solely in SmartMusic for the purpose of the grade. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want the student's report card grade to be negatively impacted by the results of this test. That's not the purpose of the formative test. The purpose is to find out where the weaknesses are. We don't want to punish the kids for that. So we're going to create a class solely for this purpose, and that will not have any impact on their grade whatsoever. If at the end, in the post-test, we want it to, we can make that decision later. But for the pre-test, we don't want it to impact their grade. We also have special cases. Percussionists, as I am one, are special cases. Can they get the same test questions? If you've got a student that's brand new to the program, a student that just switched instruments, you want to deal with those, and you may want to do so by having them create their own class so you can assess them appropriately and get usable data. All right. When you make your assignment, you've got to think of a whole bunch of things like renaming the assignment so the student doesn't know what the piece is in advance. Leave comments so they know what to expect. Have the metronome on or the accompaniment on. I think all of these things are important, but the best way might be to just demonstrate the process here. Give me just a second. We'll get over there. And here's my home page. Here's how I would create a class in case you're not familiar. I am going to warn you ahead of time. We're not going to talk a lot about how-tos in SmartMusic just so I can cover all the material I need to. But I do want to show you this. If you're not terribly familiar with SmartMusic, please find some other videos where you can get all the how-tos, like how to make an assignment or something like that. But we're going to jump right ahead, and we're going to talk about the assignment templates, which is what you get after you create an assignment, which I've already done. And my assignment would appear down here in assignment templates. Now, what I've done is I've created a unit of my 5 test questions. Performance assessment exam number 1. There's the 5. The reason I did that is now I can assign the entire unit to my kids. They can get all 5 assignments at once. I don't have to do this 5 times. By the way, if you're not sure how to do that, just hit the plus sign for units, and then you'll go down here when your unit is open and you'll click the plus sign, and that assignment will appear right in there, okay? So that's how I'm going to get that unit created. Now let's look at this assignment that's already been created. I'll hit the edit form. So this is the screen that you go to when you create the assignment. I've just already done it. So I changed the name to assessment performance 1. The student doesn't know what's being assessed, doesn't know the name of the piece. It's just called assessment performance 1. The instructions: don't hit start until you're ready. In other words, if you open this and you hit start, you're going to get your 2 minutes, and then you go reach to put your clarinet together. It might take you 2 minutes. And, oh my gosh, I got to play. So make sure you're ready before you hit start. And then you can practice out loud for the 2 minutes, and then SmartMusic will start automatically. You're just giving the instructions for the test so the students aren't unaware. Metronome or accompaniment, you do need one selected, but you're going to make the decision which one. Cursor type, still up in the air about this. You want no cursor? Do you want any cursor? Turns out I prefer any cursor. I don't worry about it too much. Measure highlight, on or off, your decision. The sight reading is the important one. Regardless of it, whether it's a sight reading example from the piece, or if it's just out of a method book or something, you can select sight reading as an option and then decide how much time you have. So the way we did it was we selected sight reading as an option and gave the kids 120 seconds. If what you value is sight reading and you want the kids to not practice it for that amount of time and you want to assess their ability to sight read, you would change the time to that and you would tell them in the notes, don't practice at a time, just look at it so I can assess your sight reading skill. All right. Of course, if it's got a melody, you're going to hit the melody and percussion. If it doesn't have, if you choose just a rhythm piece, you want to choose the rhythm and clapping only so it's not looking for a pitch. And the assessment tolerance, once again, not exactly sure what the best way to go here. I'm suggesting average because that's going to give me the correct amount of data. Not everybody's going to do well, but I'm going to get the right data that I could use to help improve instruction. After I do that, I click the next screen and I'm going to be able to see which piece I picked here. This would be, I can recognize it now, my articulation piece. I want to assess articulation. I don't care about anything else but the articulation. They could play every note wrong. As long as that articulation is right, that's what they're going to get a good grade from. Check the tempo, make sure the tempo is appropriate. We want to listen to it. And then we've got the rubrics. We've got the assessment grade, which is automatic. The correct note, correct time grade is in there. The rubric equivalency for that grade is what we decided to do because our rubric only has 4 categories, 0 through 4. And if we have an assessment grade of 97, we weren't sure where that fit in the 0 to 4. So we created an equivalency. 97 to 100 is a 4, 80 to 96 is a 3. I mean, create your own, but we wanted these to be apples to apples. So that's what the equivalency is for. And then the articulation rubric, we've created a rubric. If I remove it here and I go over to here, you can see what it is. Developing the student articulation is lacking. Student makes 2 to 5 articulation mistakes, very specific. Student makes no more than 1 articulation mistake or absolutely perfect performance. So the rubrics that we use are usable by anybody and they can be reproduced. In other words, interjudge reliability. And as many people as do this will get the same results. All right. So then I would click here and it's going to go, do you want to assign it now? And no, I don't because I have it in a unit. I'm going to assign them all together. So let's go back. Let's see, I think here, no, that's not the place. Let's go to, where'd you go? Oh, there you are. Get the right screen there. All right, administering the test. Take the entire test yourself before, I can't say anything more important than this. If you set up all those units and you assign it to the kids, you're gonna walk in, you're gonna find something that just didn't go right. I did this for 5 years and not once did I get it perfect the first time. Every single time, take the entire test yourself. You're gonna find things that you can improve in terms of how you assigned it that you would want in order to get better information. So make sure you take it yourself. Whether it's at home, in person, with others, or alone, you've got to control the variables as much as possible. Make sure that the equipment is using, going back to that question about the microphones. It doesn't do you any good if the microphones aren't working properly. So make sure that everything is working the way you want to get the best information. If the tool is affecting the results are skewed. And each student should have the same experience as the next. That's why the amount of time they have the two minutes, but every student should have the exact same experience, which means they shouldn't hear the test examples prior to. If student A and B are in the same room taking the test, well, B is listening to the test and has an advantage over A. All right, grading the test, the system that works consistently. Inter-judge reliability. 3 judges grade the same thing, they should be able to come up with the same result. That's why clear, well-defined rubrics are important. Using easy, grade-appropriate language. I bring this in. You've got elementary kids taking this test. Use language the elementary kids can understand so that eventually the elementary kids could use that rubric to assess themselves or others. So they're learning how to use the rubric and listening and assessing each other, going back to that responding issue. And of course, inter-rater reliability. If it can't be duplicated, it's not effective. So here's what we came up with. The categories we picked: pulse, duple meter, triple meter, articulation, key recognition, and tone. We had 6 examples, each one up to 4 points on the rubric. As you can see, quite clear, no errors at all for the key recognition, more than 1 accidental, 2 to 3 accidentals. That doesn't mean that if the student played the wrong rhythm, well, that's not going to affect the key recognition grade. I want to know if they're recognizing the key, so I'm just grading their key recognition. All right. This is available on the slideshow. I think we have made that accessible to all of you, that you could open this slideshow and look through that in more detail if you want. I'm not suggesting for a second that it's the right answer. I'm suggesting that it's one way to start looking to develop yours, which hopefully will be much better. Now we look at the grade book. You get all the grades at the end. You can export that into an XML to keep track. The numbers are looking a little weird here because of the way I set it up. But then again, the way I did the assessment was to create a Excel spreadsheet to do that. So let's see if I can go back there really quick to show you that. Here we go. If I go back home, go to my grade book, we'll see what it looks like on a performance. Let's open this one that I didn't grade yet. So here's the performance of one student. I forgot the student's name. And, looking at it, it doesn't look too great in terms of the assessment by SmartMusic. But as I mentioned, this is an articulation assignment. And I'm not going to take the time right now to play it for you. But if I was, and you listen to it very, very carefully, you would know that this student played the articulation absolutely accurately. This student's problem is not articulation. This student's problem was pulse. He was not following the accompaniment whatsoever. So I know that now. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on articulation. I'm going to spend more time on pulse. All right.
Kevin,
So
I'm going to take a minute to interrupt you again. There's another question here that says, did you have students do these assessments within class or at home? If in school, how did you administer these and not have students' sounds have an effect on another student's assessment in SmartMusic? Great
question. And I think I was coming to it, but let me address it as it's here. What we had a really nice setup where we had practice rooms in the high school band room, and we were able to set up 7 different stations using the practice rooms, our office, the storage room, and the band room proper. We had individual small group lessons with no more than 7 kids. So we could have each kid go to a station and take the test on their own and not be impacted by children running around the house, by what time of day they took it, by other focusing issues. They were by themselves, so their nerves weren't involved. We tried to get rid of as many variables as possible. Now, I do understand that's not possible for everybody. So what you're going to do is you're going to do what you have to make it happen, just keeping in mind you want as few variables to impact the score that you're receiving as possible. And chorus, what the chorus teacher did was he took an advanced student that was not having any trouble with the chorus music during rehearsals, put that student in a practice room, and she had one student come in at a time and take the test with that person giving them instructions in the room, walking out of the room for the test, and then going back in and getting the next student set up. It took a little bit longer. I think it took about a week to do that. Time in terms of the rehearsal was not impacted. You're only losing 2 students, and one of them has already demonstrated the ability to perform. So that's how you could address something that you wanted consistent results, but you don't have the ability to have lessons or something like that. So be creative, find the best way. If you have to send it at home, you could do that, but try to control as many things as possible. I hope that answered that question. I'm going to go right to the results. This is the results page. It looks scary, but I just told you how all this information came about. Let's look at student number 82. Pulse, not an issue. Just perfect. Pulse is good. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time with pulse or duple meter. What happened with triple meter? Well, we moved down a little bit. Where does student number 82 need work? The answer right here is articulation. Student number 82 needs work with articulation. Not only is it weak in terms of this is the teacher grade, but the SmartMusic grade it was affected. We know that student is good with rhythm, but when we put articulation in there, it messed up with his rhythm. So now we have to address that with that student. And then we have the overall score over here, the teacher versus the computer and the average, and then the performance grade. So this is your overall grade. This is the one that the state is interested in. This is the one that I'm interested in. On the bottom of the page, this is the program. How is the program doing as a whole? What is our strength in our program at our school? Looking over here, it looks to me like it's key recognition or tone are in good shape. What's the weakness? Turns out, I think it might be triple meter. We're not giving enough triple meter examples to our students as a whole. So I'm going to talk to the other, teachers and say, how about if we just put a little more triple meter stuff in there, or compound meter, sometimes it's referred to as. So that's the kind of data that I'm collecting and using. We plug in the composition and the essay portion, and I can see student 82 did not too bad with the composition of 57%, but really messed up with the essay. So even though he is a strong performer, he doesn't know how to put it into words. So we're going to try to work on that skill and a better understanding. I can take the data and I can sort it by lesson group. I can sort it by instrument. I can sort it by voice, and I can find out how my sopranos are, how my basses are, how my tenors are. I can use that information to improve instruction. The overall average unit is data, which is the bottom line. We want to make sure we have that. We want to review it. The individual and group repertoire choices for my concerts. Can I pick pieces that will help improve those student skills? Weaknesses in individual students, I can identify them and I can help the student overcome the weaknesses and continue to strengthen the strengths. Print out the individual scores, including your grade book, so you can print them out. You have them with you at all times. Identify the district-wide strengths and weaknesses, and using the same rubrics for grading. This was huge for us. We used those rubrics every time we gave an assignment. Here's an assignment on articulation. What do you think was the rubric we used? It's the one that they got assessed on. Now they're getting used to it. And eventually they become able to use that rubric themselves. What did you get on this? Well, I think I got a 3 on that because I only heard one mistake. Absolutely correct. What did we just teach that? Oh my goodness, all the things. So if you have weaknesses in Pulse, your students have weaknesses, you can address them. And these are all things that I know you're familiar with. So I'll kind of get through them here quick. When we found with Pulse, the stumbling block can be the notation. So what we did was we took the notation off the table and we taught them a head tune without notation. We taught it by rote. Can you play this without rote? Twinkle, twinkle, little star. Bum, 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 bum. Then we're going to do it at a different speed. Bum, 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 bum. So we can do it at different tempos. No notes are involved, so we don't have that stumbling block in front of us. Then we start putting accompaniments in with that. Either play them, I had a keyboard that would play, or if you go on SmartMusic and you open up that piece, but you don't show them the music, don't put the screen on, just have the accompaniment play. They can play along with the accompaniment, change the tempo, they can play along with it. They're doing it without the notation, and then we start introducing the notation, and they can develop that skill that they didn't have before. You could also do a rhythm example. I have a class of 4 kids that are having trouble with Pulse. You're going to clap a rhythm, and this person's going to play that melody, so you can all hear how it fits in together and overcome that weakness. In terms of rhythmic patterns, just start easy. Just break it down to the macro beat. Call and response chants. 1, 2, and 3, 4. Everybody, 2 and 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Once again, without the notation being the stumbling block. Once they can do it verbally and they can reproduce, then you can put the notation in front of them. All right. If you have something that's coming up that you know darn well they're not going to be able to play rhythmically, why assign it? You're just setting them up to fail. So what we would do is we would take the rhythm out of the melody and just write one line and teach that rhythm. Here's a rhythm for this song, dun, 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 without the notes. Then we put the notes in there. Dun, 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 dun. We can do all that. Now we put a melody in there, and the kids can tend to be a little more successful at it. So the melody is the last step. Melody is not going to impact their ability to improve their rhythm skills. All right, triple meter, ensemble stuff in their assignments. We've just improved that. And the SmartMusic assignments to check for understanding. Articulation, like I said, these slides are going to be there, so you can review these things. And these are not the answers. These are just a couple of suggestions. Articulation. Every rehearsal I would open up with an articulation exercise. Same musical line, ascending, descending line of 5 notes. Ta 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 ta. Everybody play. Ta 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 ta. Ta ya ta 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 ya ta ta ta. Everybody play. Ta ya ta 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 ya. They're imitating me without notes. They don't have that visual thing to mess them up. And then we put the notes in front of them and the articulations in, and they know what it's supposed to sound like, so they can associate the two a little bit better. All right. You can also create an exercise in SmartMusic, that exercise or whichever one you create, and you can use it to reinforce by making an assignment. All right. Think of articulations when you're making assignments to kids. And Sight Reading Builder has a neat feature. Another one, if you are not familiar with it, look it up. The Sight Reading Builder 1 and 2, I think, sessions are available. And random reinforcement examples. If you just want more examples of articulations, you can set that up in Sight Reading Builder and do that to reinforce. Key recognition, just assign things with different keys, assign scales. Instead of ta 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 ta, try doing it ta 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 with a different pattern. So they have to think of the key as opposed to the scale pattern. Teach a rote tune in one key and have them play it in a variety. Here's Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, now play it in D. All right, can we do that? So they're now associating those sharp signs and those flat signs with a key, and they're recognizing the key ahead of time. All right, you could also do the chord progressions and whatever key they want. I'm getting to fly through here because we're getting down there. Tone, recordings. Thank you, Mr. Boonshaft, for that idea. How are you going to improve tone without having them hear good tone? Play good tone for them. SmartMusic Suzuki for All has real players playing with really good tone, simple pieces. So if you have a student struggling, have them listen to that and try to imitate that. Listen to the recordings and use that rubric to grade it. This tone here, what do you think that is? Well, I think that fits here. Create an assignment specifically for tone to encourage the students' focus, and use the comments section to suggest listening assignments that might help your kids. All right, constant reminders, that's really all it takes. So the post-assessment, this is the one at the end of the year. The goal of the post-assessment is to check for growth and to make sure that we match the logistics so everything's the same. All apples are compared to apples, and we have a good data which selects. Here's the data at the end. This is the final assessment number for student 1, and the pre was over here, so that I do show some growth, which is what's right here. So this is the growth for my kids. I had 2 kids that did not grow, and the reason they did not grow was because of performance. Composition was my best area in terms of growth. My kids grew the most. Essay was where they grew the least. All right, so I have all this information to compare. The state loved it, the district loved it, and I loved it because I could use this information. All right, so evaluate the process every year, make it better. The first year you do it, it's not going to be good. The second year, it's going to be better. By the third year, you'll have it nailed down. And you don't have to imitate what I do. Just talk about some of the categories that we went through. All right, the process, it's time consuming, I get it, but the information is invaluable. Don't make assumptions when you go into something like this. Yeah, I know everything, right? You've been informally assessing. When you formally assess, you find out a few things that you did not know. Take the time to select. The time to select your examples is huge. Don't just pick something because it's the first thing you open. You want to make sure that it will give you consistent results. All right, and make sure the students are familiar with how to use SmartMusic, or the technology will impact the assessment, and that's not what we want. Review the process to improve results. And I personally became a better teacher after 25 years of teaching. I felt like my last 6-7 years were the best because of some of this information I had. All right, don't know how to use SmartMusic, look it up. Lots of places, the Academy, go to the videos that we're showing this weekend, some great stuff out there. You can find out how to do all these things if you're not familiar with it. So that's what I have today. I'll pass it back if there's any quick questions or anything I can do.
Yes, thank you so much, Kevin. What a wonderful presentation. There was one additional question that came in, and it was, how did you convert these assessments to grades on the report card?
What we did, thank you for bringing that, and I forgot to mention it. We did the assessment at the beginning. We did the assessment at the end. We still didn't want either one of them to affect the report card because the assessment was more important to us. But what we did feel was worthy was that growth. If we show growth from A to Z, we can then say, well, Johnny did the work necessary to grow. He might not have started the same place Susie did. He might not have ended the same place Susie did. So I don't feel comfortable giving Johnny a 30 at the beginning and a 35 when Susie gets a 90 and a 95. The difference is Johnny went from 30 to 90. Susie went from 90 to 95. Which one made the most progress? That's the part I put in their grade. So we did it as a separate column, almost like a final exam type addition to the regular quarter grade. Great question.
Great answer. Here's one more question, and I think we'll wrap it up after this. They're asking, what do you do if a student can't log into SmartMusic at all? And I'm assuming, you know, if that's a technology that you're using to deliver these kinds of assessments, what would you do if they are just not able to log in?
If the student is not familiar with how to use the program, I wouldn't assess them that way. I would have to do an informal assessment with me in the room, which is the variable of, does the student get nervous with the teacher in the room? A variable I can't control. But if it's not the specific use of the program, I could sign the kid up with any, here's my laptop, take the test on my laptop, it's the results that matter. Any student can sign up, create can use SmartMusic if they have access to it. I hope that helped.
All right, thank you so much. And with that, it's a wrap. So I'm going to put again the links to the certificate of attendance and the publisher's choice list and the download for the app into the chat. Thank
Giovanna,
you, Kevin.
I forgot to mention, I have my email address there. You're welcome to send me questions. I'll respond as quick as I can.
Thank you, Kevin, for that and for such an informative session. Before we wrap up, I just have a couple reminders. Be sure to download the certificate of attendance. I just sent the links again. We've also created a short survey for each session. Please click rate session button and just take a couple minutes to let us know how we did. We have a few minutes now before the end of our before our next sessions begin. So this is a great time to pop over to the community room and meet some of the other Connect attendees. Thanks for coming, and we'll see you in the next session.
Bye-bye.
Bye.